Welcome to the Bringing the Human Back to Human Resources podcast. I'm Tracy Chernoff, and I've spent my entire professional career in HR. Each week, we'll explore the delicate balance between people and business with the aim to reconnect the two and create meaningful outcomes. Listen in as I share my own experiences, challenge the status quo, and chat with guests from various industries about our mission to bring the human back to human resources. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the podcast. Thank you so much for being here for another week. Don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe wherever you're catching this episode. And by the way, since it's a holiday week for those of us in the US, this is going to be short and sweet. And so this week we're going to talk about resume trends. And don't worry, even though this is a short and sweet episode, I'm going to add on to this topic next week so that we can really dive in. But I want to do so after I give you all the opportunity to ask some questions so I can answer your questions specifically. So this is basically a call to all of you who might have questions about your own resumes, questions about resume trends, maybe a hot take on resume, something that you do that you find really works, whatever it is, however you want to add to the conversation. Just send me your questions either through email at contact@hrtracy.com, through the contact form on my website, hrtracy.com, or through Instagram DMs, hrtracy on Instagram. So everything is hrtracy. You can find me anywhere, and you can even send it to me over LinkedIn too. So I will take your questions and I will answer them during next week's episode when we dedicate even more time to this topic. Resume trends for 2024 are basically, things that have already existed, but they're really kind of taking a front stage, I should say, or, they're prominent in thought leadership right now and articles that are coming out around resumes. So the first trend, which I think is great, and this is coming out of COVID, and I've probably talked about this before, is that career gaps on your resume are totally okay. It's all about how you curate and talk about that career gap. And so as a reminder, I do work with clients on resume editing, formatting, design, creation, etc., interview prep, and stuff like that. So if you're interested, you can head to my website, hrtracy.com, to learn more. But I've worked with a lot of clients who have had career gaps, and it's all about how you talk about that gap. The gap itself doesn't matter if you have, some sort of background to it. If someone has a medical reason for their gap, I just usually say personal issues or personal reasons. And then if someone was a primary caregiver, then you say that. And I find that hiring managers are much more understanding since COVID because so many people ended up leaving the workforce during COVID. So this is something that's just kind of, I think, here to stay. The other thing is that resumes are becoming a little bit longer, and some people are really kind of going beyond that recommended keep it to one page mentality. The caveat to me is that if you have less than 5 years of experience, you probably still should be on one page. If you're not on one page at that level in your career and you're going on to a second page, first make sure that your formatting is effective, because if you have a formatting style that has a lot of white space, really large margins, a lot of space between experiences, then you might be wasting that space. And when it comes to wasting space, resumes are prime real estate, so every square inch should be used in a powerful way. That's what I always like to say to my clients, at least. If you are using, for example, let's say you have 10 bullets in your most recent and relevant experience. If you're using those 10 lines to either repeat information or use filler words or use or highlight things that maybe aren't like the strongest or most relevant aspects of your current job, you are wasting that space. I'm going to give you a very concrete example. I've had clients who really want to write out their resumes like this. I have successfully executed on a project for talent acquisition. Let's just say that's the phrase, that's the sentence, right? That gives me nothing. There is literally no data there on what you as a person have done to drive an outcome, right? So again, if someone writes, I have successfully driven a project, I'm realizing I don't think I'm saying this verbatim as I said before. It's hard to remember what you've said, but I have successfully driven a project for talent acquisition. Instead could be drove or executed on strategic talent acquisition project designed to acquire X number of candidates per month, or designed to promote efficiency within the organization, right? It's like, what did you do? Why did you do it? How did you do it? What was the outcome? For example, my preference, at least when writing a resume, is to really think about staying away from using like first person pronouns like I or me when I, right? When is obviously not the pronoun, but I is the pronoun. Instead, you remove the pronouns, and you could speak in the first or third person, but it's all about removing those, like, again, those pronouns and the articles too. So the, a, it, and, like, those are words that as articles ultimately just add or take away, I should say, from the space on your resume and add more for someone to read. Instead of saying, I am looking for this job, you can say, looking for a role in. So it's, and that obviously would be in an executive summary, but the reason for that is, again, because it's prime real estate, but also it's a lot more clear when you remove pronouns and articles from your sentences. When it comes to do's and don'ts, when I was recording this before, I spent a lot of time on the do's and don'ts. So I'm going to have to come back to this because, it's just, it was, I think, a really important discussion. But when you think about do's and don'ts on a resume, the biggest do for me, well, the two biggest items under the do category are: one, make sure that your formatting is strong. And this is in no particular order because I realize I'm going to say the second one and probably should have been first, but make sure your formatting is strong. Your formatting should not have a ton of white space. The font should be consistent. The dates and the formatting in how you lay out the dates should be consistent. The way that you talk about your experiences should be consistent. All of that really, really matters. And also with formatting, it should also be very readable. Your resume shouldn't be using fonts that are below a size like 8 or 9. And your fonts should also be just easy to read, generally speaking. And then the second is making sure that you don't have spelling and grammar mistakes. And I know that every single person that someone talks to about their resume is going to say that. But the reality is that I have seen in the last week 5 resumes that had spelling or grammar issues on their resumes. That's such a missed opportunity because ultimately when you have spelling and grammar mistakes on your resume, you're setting the stage for someone to judge you negatively when they should be looking at your resume and thinking, wow, this person has such amazing experience. This is awesome. Love that this person applied. Let's interview them, right? Like you want someone to automatically go right to all of the exciting things that you've done or that you're doing rather than thinking, why does this person have a spelling issue? For example, someone sent me their resume over LinkedIn because they wanted me to share it with someone, and they didn't have their email fully spelled out. It said .con or something like that. And I actually said to the person, hey, you have an email like spelling issue on your resume. And that means that if someone is like, or if this person is applying for a job and then the applicant tracking system, which uses AI, is parsing out this information and they get the email wrong, if this person's invited back for an interview, they're not getting the email. So I did mention this to this person and he was very appreciative that I said something, but that's not something that should be happening. And by the way, I'll say that a lot of the resumes that I see from HR folks is a lot of the times they're a little disappointing. Like they fall flat, right? Like at the end of the day, if you're working in HR, you really should be kind of like the pinnacle for what job experience and resumes and being, what all of that looks like and feels like. because you see potentially the most resumes out of everyone in a company, depending on your role. And I do think that there's a certain standard for HR professionals when it comes to their resumes, whether we like it or not. It's just the reality. And of course, I see a ton of amazing resumes too. And I feel really grateful that I get to work with clients on their resumes, because that means that there are more great resumes out there. But these are things that, really can make or break the opportunity for you. The other thing I'll say, and maybe these are more so like don'ts, is, really try not to, when you're going through your experience and the content as you think about your experience, try not to be repetitive or redundant or use words just because you think you have to use them. The most important thing when it comes to your content is to make sure that it's accurate, that it's concise, that it's clear, and that there's some focus on the outcomes of your actions related to the job that you've done. It doesn't matter whether you have 20 years of experience or 2, as long as you are taking, your resume seriously and the content seriously, that's what matters. The other thing is that, something that I see a lot is this like front loading of all of the expertise or all of the skills or all of the things that you've done to either the top of the resume or like on the front page. It is super important. However, your areas of expertise and the skills that you've acquired throughout your career should be apparent in your bullets. And if it's not apparent, then you need to go back to your bullets and revise them. If it is apparent, bring all of those places where you have like skills and areas of expertise or, focuses, however you phrase it, bring all of that down, because when someone is reading your resume, the very first thing that they're seeing is all of that, which is fine, but it's kind of just a lot of stuff rather than a lot of behaviors or actions or outcomes, right? So something that we always see on resumes is like, Microsoft Office proficiency, right? People kind of assume that at this point. It doesn't need to be in the prime real estate of your resume, which is at the top or on the first page. These are things that really can kind of take a little bit of a backseat. And then again, when you think about applicant tracking systems, when your resume is parsed, it's going to pull that anyway. The AI is going to see all of these skills that you've outlined, and it'll be able to pull that. And then when someone goes to search for someone with expertise in X, Y, or Z, they're going to be able to see your resume come up. And with that, I'll say the other don't that I think is really important is that, we should really be mindful to stay away from a ton of color, photos on our resume, graphics on the resume. Those are things I do not recommend. First of all, with photos, all it does is open up the opportunity for people to discriminate or have unconscious bias placed against you. Just don't do it. It's not necessary. There's no need for someone to see you when they are evaluating your fitness for a role. And when it comes to like colors and graphics, I would say traditional resumes are always safe. It doesn't matter if they look boring. Resumes are not the most exciting thing that's ever graced the earth. So it's okay if it's black and white and it's Times New Roman and the most graphic thing that you have is a line below your name. That's okay. But if you start to encroach on the territory of like super modern graphics with colors, you have to make sure you're in an industry that can appreciate that level of creativity. There's nothing wrong with it. But if you are in like finance or investment banking, that's probably going to be a great way for you never to get an interview, just because it's a very conservative industry. And unless you're looking to apply to like a very disruptive like tech company within that space, you should probably stay away from the creative stuff and lean into things that are really just kind of very traditional and conservative when it comes to resumes. I'm realizing, well, maybe there are certain questions that you all have related to resume do's and don'ts or trends. And so maybe this is a good way for us to queue up the next episode, which would be potentially about the same topic. where I can answer your questions. So if you have a question about resumes or, maybe you want some clarity on something that I've said, either you can respond to the Q&A if you're listening on Spotify, or you can send me an email at contact@hrtracy.com, or you can DM me on Instagram and I will add it to the Q&A for the next episode that follows, along in this topic. It would be great to be able to answer some questions because there are always a ton of questions on resumes. And of course, there are always questions on cover letters too. So please send me your questions. In the meantime, if you are interested in working with me on your resume, you can head to my website, hrtracy.com, and find more information there. And also, my website did go through a redesign, so I would love your feedback on that and take a look and see all of the new things that are there for your perusal. Thank you so much. I hope you have a wonderful week ahead and a happy 4th of July if you celebrate and you're in the US. Thank you so much. Talk soon. Hey, just before you go, don't forget to subscribe to the show so that you are the first to hear when an episode drops each week. And maybe leave a 5-star review and a comment about how much you loved this episode. Plus, if you have someone in mind who would really enjoy this episode, make sure you share it with them. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I will see you next week.